Jury trials, well, we can talk about them. You're unlikely to get one unless you're charged with one of the most very serious crimes in this land. That's after the announcement from the Justice Secretary, as expected a week ago by David Lammy, that he was actually going to cut our chances of our right to ask a jury to decide if we are guilty or innocent if we are charged with a serious crime. If you face 3 years or less behind bars, nope, sorry, it's going to be a magistrate or it's going to be a judge sitting on his or her own deciding your fate. Well, let's talk about this with Robert Courts KC. He's a barrister and former Solicitor General. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. It is extraordinary, as everyone and his dog has pointed out, that David Lammy only a few years ago, during the pandemic, when the government, the then Tory government, said, look, we might have to move to non-jury trials because of these COVID rules that we ourselves have brought in. He said, no, you can't do that. It's a fundamental attack on a fundamental right in our democracy. 5 years on, because there's a backlog in the courts, absolutely fine to do it. Is it?
It's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? Who'd have thought that I'd be saying that I agree with David Lammy, but I did agree with him back then. Defending jury trials is absolutely vital. And when he was criticising the proposal to do away with them, he was absolutely right, but he's absolutely wrong now. And he's wrong because this really is a fundamental attack upon liberty. The great thing about a jury trial is that they are able to acquit people for whatever reason whatsoever. They can't be asked, they can't be criticised, and that is the ultimate protection against an overweening, overmighty government. And it really is quite extraordinary that David Lammy has been quoting Magna Carta, of all things, as justification for doing this.
He argues, because people say it's your right to be judged, you have under Magna Carta, you cannot have your freedom taken away from you unless it's by your peers. But he said it also goes on to say justice delayed is justice denied. But there's a balance, and he's quite right to say that someone who is raped today shouldn't have to wait 5 years to get a guilty verdict. By the way, also someone falsely accused of rape shouldn't have to wait 5 years to have their life back. But is there any evidence that cutting your right to a jury trial is going to make any difference to the backlog in the courts that we currently have, some 80,000 cases?
No, in a word. You've exactly put your finger on it. That's quite right. And it's true to say that justice delayed is justice denied. And clearly there is a big backlog, and that is unacceptable. And something has to be done about this. But this is the judicial equivalent of blowing the doors off, because the diagnosis of what is causing the backlog is wrong. He's wrong about that. It's not juries. And therefore, the solution that he's proposing isn't going to solve the problem. The fact is that the backlog is there and exists anyway. And if people have elected a jury trial and are waiting for a trial to come along now, then this move isn't going to do anything about the backlog. So this solution fails on its own terms.
Well, this is it. I mean, look, you've got to remember, you keep talking about, there are other things that could be done. You as former Solicitor General, you were a Conservative. There was a decision under David Cameron and George Osborne. There was going to be austerity. There were massive cuts to the criminal justice system. They had a massive impact in terms of every aspect, whether it was, number of trials, pay for legal aid, number of prison places, you name it, across the board. We are living with the results of that. I actually almost felt sorry for the Justice Secretary having to release a load of prisoners last year, because let's face it, Tories would have done it too, because there wasn't enough prison space, because not enough prisons were built. There has been an abject lack of funding for our criminal justice system, and we're reaping our deserts of that, aren't we?
Yeah. So, look, you have to be fair and even-handed about this. Justice hasn't had the priority that it deserves for many years, and every party has some responsibility for that. Conservatives, Liberals under the coalition government, let's not forget, Liberals were a part of that as well, and then Labour more recently. But, we can always go into the reasons why there had to be, fiscal restraint back in the 2010 period.
There were reasons, but that's it. I mean, and then we can blame Labour for there wasn't the end of boom and bust. We can keep blaming everyone, but at the end of the day, the job of governments is to spend our money wisely. And our money wasn't spent wisely, because we do need a functioning criminal justice system.
Well, that's right. There's two things, aren't there? And in your programme this morning, you've been dealing with them. There are two things that only governments can do, and they need to do them well. And that is, firstly, defending our country. Only government can do that. They've got to invest in that. And then secondly, justice. Only the government can do that, and they have to decide to do so. And to govern is to choose. And this government badly wanted to be in government and have got themselves into that position. They now have that serious responsibility of providing the system we want to live in. And if we look only at the budget, last week, that is a massive spending spree that they've gone on welfare, and they have raised taxes to a historic level to do so and are borrowing more to do it. That is a political choice that they have made.
That's 16 billion not spent on benefits but spent on the criminal justice system and defence. I'd have been, OK, fair enough, absolutely quite happy with that. But this is it, and people often think, don't they, it's the Cinderella service. Well, it's not going to affect me. Well, until it does. What would you do instead of scrapping the right to a jury trial? What would you do to actually mean that we could actually clear a big slice of that backlog?
Yeah, so there's two things that you can do that particularly spring to mind, neither of which is easy, and they require some political bravery. And the first of that is to look into the point you raised just a moment ago, which is legal aid rates.
Yep.
The independent bar, and I am an independent barrister by background. I prosecuted in the Crown Courts before I was elected to Parliament, is extremely efficient. It is extremely dutiful, and it is in the position to clear this backlog. But in order to do so, there have to be criminal lawyers who are willing to operate in the criminal system.
Some of them are basically, they're actually, actually it's costing them money to go to a case once they've got their travel and covering the case rate. So, so upping the legal aid rates. What's the other? What else would you suggest?
So the other bit is the slightly more boring but important bit, which I did a lot of work on, as many did in the last government as well, and that is doing things like getting the CPS and the police to work closely together so that when the cases go to court, they're ready. Yes. Because quite often what happens is there's a link up and a bit of evidence is missing, meaning that there's then a delay.
And getting everything off paper as well, getting into the digital age?
Yeah, getting into digital aid, getting everything so that it's electronic, so that it's efficient, but above all, getting the police and the CPS to work really well together. So what the CPS need to prosecute successfully is provided by the police.
But also, small matter of spending more to have more courts open and more judges sitting every single day.
Yes, it's legal aid lawyers the primary pinch point, though. You're absolutely right. If you go into a courtroom today, you'll see that there are courts empty. So court sitting days could be made available. Judges could be made available. Yeah. Don't forget, you can also get barristers as part-time judges. They're called recorders. So
there are plenty of other things that could be done rather than taking away our 800-year-old rights. Small point worth making. Robert Courts, so appreciate you joining. He's a barrister and former Solicitor General. I mean, Claire, we've been talking about